Hello, Matt. Happy 420 to you, my friend.
Hey, yeah, I'm wearing green. It's kind of light green, so it's not really showing up very well. Yeah. So, did you get the intro I made?
I did. I got it in my inbox this morning. It was quite a sight to wake up to, Matt.
And it was great, right?
Matt, I like to keep it honest with you, right? You're my pal. You're my buddy. You're my old pal. It's kind of shit, man. It's not your best work. Not your
Well,
best
that's
work.
hurtful. But listen, dude, there was an actual live leprechaun caught on camera in that video.
Yeah, I know, Matt, but I don't know. It's a little long. I don't know if it necessarily is what we want this cold open to be, Matt. I don't know, man.
Um, Listen, Dylan, uh, are you the? Is this your show or is this our show?
It is our show. It is the Dill Pickle Movie Network. So
Yes, but this show is our show. We've done it
yes.
together. We've never done it without each other. This is our
Hmm.
show.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to pull in some host cred here and
Mm.
insist that this be the intro to our episode.
This is like your hall pass, if you will. Like
This
this is
is
the
it.
one.
I'm
Okay.
I'm cashing this in.
All right, Matt. You know what? It's a happy 420 holiday. I delayed this episode. This is my fault that it is a month late. So you know what, Matt? I'll let you cash in your hall pass right there. So are we
All
gonna
right.
play this intro, Matt?
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, as always, I have to say the magic word. The magic word will bring forth the intro. I have specifically engineered the magic word to bring forth this intro. So it's a good thing you acquiesced because it was going to happen either way. And that is Framewreck.
It kind of reminds you of that movie, The Leprechaun. Remember with that little guy who goes, I'm the leprechaun. Gosh, I'm the leprechaun.
Cool it, okay.
I'm the leprechaun.
Sounded alright.
Don't try and steal me, Pasco. Chill.
They're the comic people.
What
I
are
have
the
luck
monsters
with
eating, sweetie?
I'm not, sweetie. Stop it, sweet.
Pixie dust. Pixie dust. Sweetie, it's me. It's me. The leprechaun. Where you gonna move?
Get away,
Are you
leprechaun.
gonna move to higher? Because I'm the leprechaun.
Darby, me boy, we've had great sport together. We did. You've been a grand adversary. It's sorry I am to see you come to this.
What a story, Mark.
So there's the intro. Welcome to Framewreck, everyone. Our 420 episode. This was supposed to be our St. Patrick's Day episode, but because of my own personal health issues, we pushed it a month to now make it a 420 episode because it still celebrates green. That was our best way of fitting it in. But of course, we have a guest today. Very excited. We can't do a bracket with two people because it could just end up in deadlock. So we need a third person to help break these ties here, and we do have a favorite of the show. We have Chris Baker Scott returning back to the show. How's it going, Chris? And what do you think of that intro?
It's going awesome. Thought it was great. Thought it was interesting.
Interesting.
Uh,
Sorry, word for
Chris,
that.
that was a real life caught on camera leprechaun putting stuff in that bucket. That's at least that's what the internet told me. I do have to believe.
Well, you can never doubt the internet.
Right, of course.
Yeah, no. But yeah, we are doing a March Madness style bracket here. There are 8 Leprechaun films, so Matt had a brilliant idea of narrowing it down to the best or the most frame-wrecky Leprechaun film. Matt will kind of explain the general rules to how we're gonna actually clarify a winner. Are we gonna go based on quality, based on badness, or somewhere in between? But we do have 8 Leprechaun movies to talk about, and rather than talking about it chronologically, we're gonna be doing it as a bracket. And I did want to shout out my mom because she did inspire this idea from the very start of just doing the Leprechaun movies. She was watching them on Sci-Fi one day and was like, "You guys should cover these." And we wanted her as a guest, but we understand why she didn't want to, be on this episode. But I'm glad she inspired it. So shout out, Mom. Matt, what are your thoughts going into this in terms of this bracket? What made you think of this idea here?
Well, first of all, Becky Randazzo, who is my best friend, even though I've never met her, did inspire this. She had the brilliant idea. You guys should cover this. That it was last year. She said you guys should cover this next St. Patrick's Day, and it's like, yes, we have to do that, and she has to be on. But of course, she doesn't have to. She is not a host of the show, so she doesn't have to do it. It was just her idea. So I was like, hey, we need to get this. We need to do this. Let's do it bracket style for March Madness, which we also missed. And we'll have Chris on to talk about these because he's our horror guy, or he's one of our horror guys, and also not to be indelicate, but there are 2 black movies, and we didn't want 2 white guys talking about
Yeah, no,
alone.
Fair choice, especially with those movies.
Yeah.
Which is very funny considering when I looked up one of the directors of them, very, very white director as well. So that's something we'll talk about. March Madness, it's funny because March Madness does end in April anyway. So I guess it's kind of fitting that we did end this journey in April. But it's 8 films. They are short, but it is a lot to watch back to back. So I needed some time to just get through them and battling my own stuff. So thank you all for bearing with me, but I'm happy we're here. Happy we're finally doing this. Matt, is there any background we want to get into before we actually talk about each individual movie, or do you want to just dive right in?
Well, we can pretty much dive in. I think anything we need to talk about, we can talk about in the individual movies. As far as how we are ranking these or how we are judging the winner, we are doing it by the Framewreck standard. If you've ever watched this show, and if you haven't, you should go watch some of them. They're good. We generally will rate a movie after we talk about it based on our Framewreck scale, which is how entertaining it is because it's bad. So a genuinely good movie would rank relatively low because even though it's entertaining, it's not entertaining it's entertaining because it's genuinely good. A genuinely bad movie that's not entertaining would also rank pretty low because it's bad but not entertaining. What we want is that special sweet spot where it's really bad but also very, very fun to watch. And there are a couple of these that are absolutely in that, and there are a couple of these that are absolutely not in that range. So I'm very excited to talk about it. So basically, when we're deciding between 2, we may pick the one we don't like as much just because it fits the Framewreck model a little bit better. It just kind of depends. I have a favorite, and it is not the one that I think is going to win. So let me just put it that way.
Yeah. And I just do want to ask before we get in the bracket though, because this is my first time watching these films, but what were your experiences watching these? Like, is this a franchise you guys like kind of saw from the beginning? Is this something you came around to recently? We'll start with you, Chris. Like, what is your background with the Leprechaun series?
My background is I honestly, I watched them when I was a kid, like back in the 90s. Like growing up, watched like a lot of schlocky horror and loved it. Loved the first 2 specifically as a kid. And I still really do like the first 2. The third one kind of starts to lose me. And then the 4th one in space, I'm kind of like, it's okay. And then beyond that, basically kind of grew up with the franchise. It's not a franchise that a lot of people really talk that much about, I've noticed. But they're still really good horror comedies, in my opinion. Like, you have to like look at it through that lens of them being like horror comedies.
Right. Well, and there's a 25-year difference between the first one and the last one. That shows the endurance of this series, even though they're not the super popular horror movies or super popular comedies they at least have endurance.
And I think the popularity also stems down to the fact that they weren't all theatrically released too. It's kind of like the Chucky thing, where it's like the first few you get in theaters, but then the next few are like straight to DVD. So you really have to be like in the know. Like you have to be a horror fan, or specifically, like you said, Chris, like a schlocky horror fan to even seek them out, because they're not going to be as readily available. I mean, they are going to be more readily available technically, because you can get them quickly at a video store, but it's not going to be the type of movie that you see advertised in theaters and that, you know, is constantly in like the social media zeitgeist pop culture advertising scheme. And then the last one being like a sci-fi TV film too. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's very interesting how this kind of evolved as just a franchise, and you can kind of see the quality also kind of shift depending on the format and the medium that it's presenting to, which we also see with like the Child's Play movies. Is like, I think, the best kind of comparison for it. And now that Sci-Fi has the rights to both, I mean, I'd love to see a team up, Chucky, Leprechaun.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Face off or something. Yeah. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, that's great. Well, first of all, Dylan, you adorable young little man. In 1995, that came to straight to VHS, not DVD. Leprechaun 3.
Did I say DVD? I meant video. I meant video in general.
Well, what's funny is that you were going with an antiquated medium, and you still went too new. But anyway, as far as me, 1993, I was 9 years old. So this was basically made for me. I was the target audience for Leprechaun because I was 9 years old. I saw Leprechaun 1 and 2 back then. That was it. That was as far as I had seen until we did this rewatch, or until we did this watch. When I started working at the video store, which was in 2002, when I was just at the end of my high school career, I started working at the video store, and I saw on the shelf Leprechaun in the Hood, and I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "Is this for real?" And then I noticed in space, I was like, "They have lost the plot of this series. What is happening?" And then in 2003, which was while I was working at the video store, Back to the Hood came out, and I was like, "Oh my god, what this?" And from then, I was like, "I just have to watch this whole series," and I never did. So now I was glad. So thank you, Becky Randazzo, for giving me a good reason to go and watch all of these. Because let me tell you, I had a great time. They're not all good. They're not all terrible, as terrible as some people might say they are. There's actually a few surprises in there, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But I'm very, very excited to talk about these movies.
Yeah, and like you said, like it's like, wait, they're in the Hood, then they're in space. Like it kind of bounces around, but I think that's kind of the fun of it, because like it doesn't really stick to the regular Leprechaun lore. Like they never go to Ireland. Like that's the thing.
There's one
origin.
There's one that takes place on St. Patrick's Day, and there's one that takes place in Ireland. Those are the only two instances where those things happen.
Is the one that probably is farthest back in my brain. So it's like one of those things though, where it's like it's very much like you would never think, oh, let's make a movie about a leprechaun. Let's set it in Vegas, or let's set it in space, or and I think that's what adds kind of to the charm of it too. It's just all the wildness. But cool. Let's get into our bracket then. Let me show you how it shook out. And the whole thing is this was seeded by an average of Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic and IMDb and Letterboxd. This is essentially kind of like if you were to average all the scores together. This is the general consensus amongst critics and audiences. I tried to get the most accurate cumulative seeding as I could based on quality. Now, obviously, we are judging it by different standards than just what is the best movie. So our winner is probably not going to necessarily be what is the best movie, but it's seeded by what is generally, known as the best or worst movie. So the number one seed with the highest rating overall is the newest one, Leprechaun Returns. Our 2 seed is the original Leprechaun. Our 3 seed is Leprechaun in the Hood. Our 4 seed, Leprechaun Back in the Hood, or Back to the Hood. Our 5 seed is Leprechaun 3. Our 6 seed is Leprechaun 2. Our 7 seed, Leprechaun 4 in space. And our 8 seed is the Leprechaun Origins. So that is kind of how the general consensus would rank them if they're just kind of going by quality, I guess, or just rating, I guess, because I don't know necessarily even if their ratings are taking into account the Framewreckness of it all or not. But this is where we seeded them out. Do we want to start at the bottom because it has the first Leprechaun in it, or do we want to start at the top and just work our way down?
I think we start with one. I think we start
The one seed?
One seed, one and 8, that matchup.
Okay, so at the top. So we have the newest 2 Leprechaun movies here. The 1 seed Leprechaun Returns and the 8 seed Leprechaun Origins here.
Okay.
Matt, you want to start the discussion here?
Let me just say that this is something that I should have mentioned before when we were talking about the series as a whole. The continuity of the series is wild.
Yes.
I don't know if the intention is for them to be different, but different leprechauns that are just played by the same person for the most part, or for just for us to not really care about that because he dies in one and then he comes back in another. But then, like in 4, they show that he can regenerate, I guess, and maybe that's what's going on. But then Returns just is a direct sequel, to number 1. So so the continuity is crazy, and I love that. That's one thing that as I was watching it, and I was like, gosh, all these different, like there's a different way to kill him, like every movie, and like but that's one of the things that made me just love this watch through, was just all of the ways that the continuity didn't work. That being said, when I said at the beginning that there was some that surprised me, and then there were some that are absolutely not within our Framewreck thing, I was specifically talking about these 2 movies. Leprechaun Returns was surprisingly fun. I'm
so glad to hear that.
It was surprisingly good. I'm not saying it was like a great movie. It's not a good movie. I don't think that I would recommend it to somebody who wasn't seeking out Leprechaun movies, but it was good. The girl they cast as as Jennifer Aniston's daughter looked like Jennifer Aniston. Like, she made Jennifer Aniston faces a lot throughout the movie. They brought back what's his name? Ozzy.
Ozzy,
which obviously is just a really great, fun character to watch. And they treated him with more respect, even though they killed him off unceremoniously in the movie. They treated him with more respect than they did in the first movie, which I loved. And like, there was just so much in this to love. There were some dull parts. There were some parts where, when it came down to like the horror part, did not work as well as the comedy side. Is that no? Do you feel differently about that?
I don't know. We'll talk.
I thought that like I guess not. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe the horror worked all right. Like the stalking portions didn't feel like they kind of in the back of my mind, versus the more fun parts worked a little bit better for me. Before we talk about Leprechaun Origins, I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on Leprechaun Returns.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I actively thought it was hilarious. Like, I thought it was funny. I thought it was just a really great horror comedy. I thought it was a great legacy, like direct sequel to the original. The dialogue was very funny. One line specifically got me so good, and that's when the main character, she's trying to convince her friends that there's a leprechaun out there, and I think they see it or something, and one of them just goes, I mean, it could just be some crackhead that got a hold of the wrong stuff, which is a direct reference to the old internet video meme where there was a leprechaun in like the hood, basically. So that was just brilliant. Loved the creature design of the leprechaun. Thought it was great.
Speaking of that, Lyndon Porco, who played him, while he wasn't a mimic of Warwick Davis, he was actually pretty good. Like, he was good. Like, he played it really well, which I really dug as well. I thought that I didn't mention that, but I thought he was really good.
And honestly, and with these 2, Leprechaun Returns and Leprechaun Origins, I hadn't seen them until this bracket. Like, I had seen every other Leprechaun movie in the franchise. Those were the only 2 that I just wasn't familiar with. And like I said before, I was pleasantly surprised with Leprechaun Returns. I didn't know it was going to be a direct sequel to the original, actually, going into it. It was a great surprise.
Yeah. I'd love to know what the turnaround was, because Halloween comes out 2 months before Leprechaun Returns. Leprechaun Returns was December 2018, which is 2 months after the Jamie Lee Curtis revival of Halloween. It's basically doing the same thing. It's like, this is going to be a continuation of the original, where these characters are aged and stuff, but obviously not using Jennifer Aniston herself, but using her daughter, which I think was a smart choice. I think, having Jennifer Aniston, and we'll talk about it when we talk about the original, just like it is a distraction because she's the only star in that movie, next to Warwick Davis, obviously, but Warwick Davis is so masked by the character and the makeup and stuff. So it was cool here how they didn't try too hard to like make Jennifer Aniston the thing. It was instead like about the legacy. And I think for a legacy sequel, this is as good as a Leprechaun legacy sequel can be. I think like it kind of, like you guys said, it has like the similar tone as the original, because I think the best charm of this, and I think, seeing as we are on a show called Framewreck, is the silliness, is the schlock. And I think honestly, Leprechaun Returns has the least of it in terms of schlock, because the dialogue tries sometimes to be really corny and sappy and cheesy. But I think the aesthetic is not at all as schlocky as the like run of 6 films that came before it. And that's kind of where I was a little let down. It felt like it was a little too serious. But there were moments, and I think this is kind of why I made that face, Matt, when you mentioned the horror. I don't necessarily think it's that it's very scary, but the kills are great. And I think the kills, like the solar panel where it slices the guy
that was great.
Oh,
is
God,
such
that
a
was
good
so
kill.
good. Yeah.
The like drone kill is great. And then the final, kills, I guess, of the Leprechaun himself are great. Like, I think the actual horror is achieved very, very well here. Even though I still think the writing, like the Werner Herzog comment is just so bad, where he's like, a film director has to be the captain of the ship. Werner Herzog could do it, so can I, or something like that. Like, just all these really weird lines that feel like they would have belonged better in one of the schlockier Leprechauns movies, but because this one is a little serious, it doesn't always gel. But I think the actual violence and the tone and the characterization of the Leprechaun, played by, I already forgot his name, but the new casting of the Leprechaun, I think it's very
Lyndon Porco is his name.
Lyndon Porcos is solid enough that it kind of still feels like it belongs in the franchise without feeling one of the franchise, which is, I guess, what a lot of these legacy sequels are trying to do. So I'm a little bit more mixed on it, but I do still think it is, I think, just a better movie than a lot of these, even though I don't necessarily know if it is as successful as a Leprechaun movie, because it doesn't have that over-the-top silliness that we come to expect. And I think with both these movies, just not having Warwick Davis there, as good as he is, this new casting, I still just think I'm always going to choose to watch one with Warwick Davis in it because of what he brings to the franchise. And I think these two films, both of them, suffer because he's not in it, just because I think he kind of controls the tone, if that makes sense. But
if I can bridge the gap a little bit that between us here, and that is that I agree with you. It doesn't feel as much like the other ones because it's not a schlocky. It does feel, number one, it does feel like a sequel to the first one.
Right.
But also, I will say that, and we'll talk about Origins in a second, it's like a perfect balance between what they were doing and what they tried to do with Origins. It's like they were like, we want to make it a little bit more serious, but we don't want to do what we did with Origins.
Right. We don't want to strip it completely of the
right. We don't want to strip it completely. So
yeah.
To me, it feels like a really good balance. And again, when you say you're mixed, I'm also mixed. It's not a great movie. It was just far more entertaining than I thought it was going to be.
Well, and I think there's something to be said about if you watch it right after the first Leprechaun. Like, if you were to watch Leprechaun, then Leprechaun Returns, I think this would play better. But when you watch them all in order with all the, like, kind of straight to VHS movies in between, I do think that's where the tonal drasticness hits. But it doesn't hit as drastically as Origins, where it's like a complete 180, because we're getting off of Back to the Hood, and then the very next one is this Origins, which is trying something completely different, doesn't want to be silly whatsoever, which we can segue us into our conversation about that, because I don't have a lot to say about it, because it's honestly the most forgettable because of that. It doesn't have Warwick Davis. It doesn't have any memorable kills that I can think of off the top of my head. The wackiness is gone, the humor. Like, I really was worried for Returns because of Origins, because I was like, I just don't see how making it more serious is ever gonna, fit what this franchise has evolved into,
Right.
Yeah.
I will. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, the Leprechaun movies, they're built on like being silly. Like that's why going into Origins, I was just kind of like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
I will say, okay, so when I started this movie, I put it in and I started it. The WWE logo came up. I said, oh my God, they're going to make Hornswoggle. Dylan Postle was his name. So Dylan, they're going to make Hornswoggle the Leprechaun. And I was like, oh God, that's the worst thing I've ever heard of. And then I saw what they were. And suddenly I was like, God, why didn't they make, because they did use Hornswoggle. Dylan Postle was the Leprechaun, but he wasn't the wacky thing you see from WWE wrestling when he's in. You guys aren't wrestling guys, but if you look up a video of Hornswoggle as a Leprechaun, he's doing the little dances and he's sprightly. And I thought, oh God, that's what they're gonna do. And then they didn't, and I was like, God, I wish they had done that now.
Yeah,
like,
it would have fit.
I was so disappointed when I realized it's not. He doesn't speak. He doesn't do anything. Casting Hornswoggle was just to put his name on the thing. He's barely in it. He's barely in the movie.
Yeah.
And when he is, it's like on this blur, and like you don't really see him.
Well, and that's the whole thing for a movie called Leprechaun Origins. I'm not getting a lot of the origin from it. You know, like what are we supposed to be learning about this character's mythology and stuff when we don't even see him? You know, and I guess that's something to be said. Like you don't see the shark a lot in Jaws, you know, but it's not like that. It's like Leprechaun movies are about the Leprechaun, and that's like what you come to see. That's the ticket you want to. I guess if there was a ticket for this film to buy, would be for that, you know? Right.
Well, and yes, exactly. Like what is this the origin of? Because it's definitely not the origin of Lep,
the Leprechaun that we know. Yeah,
old Lep from the other movies. It's not a Lep origin. It's something. And you know, the credits do say based on characters by Mark Jones. It's not based on any characters by Mark Jones that I saw, which is the guy who wrote the first one. And so that, you know, they have to put that because it's a sequel, but it's a sequel in name only, or a prequel in name only. There's absolutely nothing right to it. I will say that to its credit, it does do the tension relatively well, and with not great. Like it wasn't a great horror movie or anything, but Brendan Fletcher, who was the guy who was trying to have sex with this girl the whole movie, or who was in the couple with the girl and they were kissing all the time. Brendan Fletcher was really good, and I was disappointed that he died. And I was like, I wish he would have lived. The other boyfriend, the boyfriend to the main character girl, was just a dick the whole time.
I know.
I don't feel like he like they addressed that at all. Like I felt like, okay, well, this is like a character thing. But then they didn't really treat it like he was getting punished when he died or like it mattered at all. He was just a dick to her through the whole movie, and that seemed fine.
Well, when they were at the pub and like she mentions that she's going to put off going to college to, you know, study history or whatever to be closer to like her dickish boyfriend, and her friend was just like, that's crazy. Why are you doing that? I cared about that plot. And I want to see that get resolved more than the Leprechaun. Like, and that's a problem.
Yeah. So I think the closest thing I can compare this to is how I felt watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, where it's like it's clearly trying to embody some of Leprechaun, but it's trying to do it in a different way that doesn't necessarily understand the franchise, especially how silly the franchise had gotten. And I know it's trying to be like, you know, a rejuvenation of it, but then when you put the Origins name on it, it gives you the implication that it means something to the franchise at large and not just its own separate entity. So I just don't like it.
Yeah, it felt like to me, when I think about it, it felt almost like and this is not really fair because I don't think they're this bad, but the Rob Zombie Halloweens where it's like, okay, that's not really Michael Myers. That's not really a thing. Like, so it feels a little bit like that. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Like they aren't really, they don't seem to understand the thing that they have. Yeah, definitely for sure. I agree. For me, as far as this bracket goes, Origins can fuck off. It's not entertaining, it's bad, but it's not entertaining because it's bad. Leprechaun is entertaining, at least and has some of the cheese in it. So for me, Leprechaun advances.
Leprechaun Returns, you mean?
Yeah, Leprechaun Returns.
Yeah.
A Leprechaun movie advances, yes.
Chris, what would you put your vote to?
I would agree. Leprechaun Returns, like, it was just a constant wink, I feel like, to the audience. Like, it took me so long in that movie to realize that the sorority house, their initials were AU, which is gold. Basically,
that's good. I didn't even realize that. Yeah, that's really good.
It's a periodic element for gold, and I'm like, oh, duh.
Yeah, I think it understands the humor just enough. I wish it had gone further, but you're right. As a continuation of just the original Leprechaun, I think it succeeds in that. And like, it's still not a great movie. So like, it still has that subtle badness that makes it funny. And some of the dialogue did make me laugh. Like the Werner Herzog joke is still the funniest thing in the world. Cool. So Leprechaun Returns is advancing to the next round. Next, Matt, do you want to go down to the next matchup or go to the number 2 seed?
I want to go 2 seed.
Okay, so we're gonna go to Leprechaun, the OG, versus Leprechaun 4 in space. Ooh, Chris, let's start off with you for this one.
Well, I will say, Leprechaun, the original, it holds just a special place because obviously it's the first one that came out. I remember watching it way back when, and I feel like it's a hard one to beat in this situation. So I think I mentioned before, Leprechaun in space, not really my favorite. It is a bad movie. It does have laughs, but it's a hard one. It's a hard one.
So Leprechaun. This is the thing that should always, that I didn't notice when I was a kid, but I noticed definitely while watching this time, was written as a straight horror movie. Then they cast Warwick Davis, and then they were like, "Oh, he's kind of funny." And so then they put in jokes. And that's what the movie feels like. It feels like a movie that they originally didn't want to make funny, and then it just was, so they put in more jokes. And I love that about it. Because it has that thing that we look for in a good bad movie, which is the unintentional nature of the badness. And it has that a little bit where they did not intend for it to be funny. It was, and so they made it funnier. And so I think that it does have that. As I said, I was 9 when Leprechaun came out. I loved it. I just enjoyed the movie. I like how the kid is the one who kills him at the end, because I was a kid and I was like, yeah, kid with the slingshot. Mom, I need a slingshot. And you know that. So I've always really enjoyed that movie. Was this your first time watching it, Dill?
This is my first time watching all of these, and it's interesting because I don't have that nostalgia. So, yeah, this one didn't work as well for me because I think I was watching it because I didn't even know. I knew we were doing this for Framewreck, but I truly didn't know the tone of what Leprechaun itself would become. So like I was watching this and kind of, I did feel like that awkwardness of like, it feels like it should be funnier here, but it's not quite. And it's trying to be a little too serious as a horror movie, but it's not truly as scary either as I'd like it to be. And I think that was my only big complaint of the original, is that it just didn't scare me because it's not quite like that. You don't go to the Leprechaun movies to be scared necessarily. You know, you go for the fun of it. And I think that's why we'll talk about Leprechaun 4 in space in a sec, but I do think some of the later movies, I think just the sillier they get, I think they appeal to me more because I just don't have that nostalgic tie of like watching them as I grew up. So I'm just watching them all in the same lens. And I just think the less it takes itself seriously, the better for me. But I do see why people loved it so much too. And I think it is because also Warwick Davis has just created such a great character. He just like from the start just is so magnetic to watch, and it's one of those things where he always feels like he's a side character in every movie you see him in. So where it's awesome, unless you're watching Willow, but I've never seen that. But like, you know, to see him finally get the spotlight as an actor and see him just go balls to the wall, even in this film where the material's not necessarily allowing him to do that, but he just does it naturally, is so good. And I did say a little bit earlier about the Jennifer Aniston thing, where it's like, it's hard not to be, I don't want to say distracted by it, but it is like the one star in this whole 8 movie run that's like a very like kind of front and center, like it's almost distracting to a point to where I'm like, you should be better in this because you're Jennifer Aniston, but this was pre-Friends, so like I get it, but also I'm just like, I don't know, I feel like I like the character more because it was Jennifer Aniston, but I feel like if it wasn't her, would I be as invested? I'm not sure. But again, that's me watching it as a at the time, 25-year-old who had never seen it before, so it's very, very interesting to watch this now, knowing other people's fondness for it. And I hate that I didn't like it as much, because I know it's like kind of widely accepted. I mean, here it's the number 2 seed, but widely accepted as amongst others is like, no, this is the good one, and then it gets bad from there, But yeah, I didn't feel the same positivity toward it, but I still, I get it. I get why people love it, and I love Warwick Davis. So
I definitely see a lot of what you're saying there. Warwick Davis is just so good in this, and this is where he creates that, and like I said, it's because of him that they went in the comedy direction, because they originally were just doing straight horror until they cast him. The score in this movie is just all over the fucking place. Sometimes it's really dark music when there's something funny happening. Sometimes it's like a sitcom intro music during like a horror scene. It's very weird, which also contributes to it in that way. But yeah, let's talk about Leprechaun in Space, because this one I feel like, okay, let me I just want to tell you the origin of this, because I happen to know it. And it feels like the type of movie where they were writing a sci-fi movie and decided to make it a Leprechaun movie, similar to like what they do with the Cloverfield movies and stuff like that, or like what they used to do with action movies that were interchangeable. Die Hard of the Vengeance was written as a sequel to Lethal Weapon. Like it's that kind of thing. So that's what it feels like, but it's not. Apollo 13 came out, or the poster for Apollo 13 came out, and it made a producer laugh to imagine the Leprechaun's face where Jim Lovell's face was. And so they made the movie. The poster for this movie, if you look at the poster for Leprechaun in Space, is literally the moon landing with the Leprechaun's face over it, as he envisioned it as his joke. So this movie was made as a joke.
Dreams can happen. Just God.
So this movie was completely made as a joke, which, while it does make it entertaining, it does make it very intentional what they're doing. So the question for me, it's kind of like, okay, so like with the first Leprechaun, I wonder, was the shoe thing part of what they added to make it funny, or was that part of what was in it that made it unintentionally funny? I don't know. I choose to think that the shoe thing is unintentionally funny. And so that makes me enjoy that a little bit more. With this, I don't know what is unintentional and what's intentional. I kind of feel like it's all intentional.
A lot of it feels intentional.
A lot of it feels intentional and doesn't work as well. That's my issue with this movie, is that some of it feels like it's supposed to be funny and doesn't work quite as well. I will say that it starts out perfectly as a 90s sci-fi movie. It almost feels like a ripoff of Aliens, or any of those Commandos in space type movies, Starship Troopers, stuff like that. It feels exactly like that. The characters are just caricatures of that kind of movie. So it starts out perfectly as that kind of movie. Then you get this weird Leprechaun story happening, and again, this comes down to the weird continuity with this series. This happens in the future, I guess, on a planet. Is he from space? Did he go to space? I don't know. This is very, very weird. Suddenly he has these powers that he doesn't seem to have in the other movies, but it is the future, so maybe he developed. I don't know. It's very, very weird, and that's the thing that keeps it on the higher end for me. I'm sorry, I'm working this all out in my brain while I talk. That keeps it higher for me because it's so ridiculous. But again, like I said, the jokes feel intentional and don't quite work quite as well, and that's what lowers it down. I'd like to hear Dylan's thoughts as a first-time watcher of this series. how he felt about this one.
I freaking love it. But it's not because it's good. And I think it's one of those things where I honestly wasn't sure how intentional it was. Because there are so many different like little plot holes and stuff that you're like, how the hell does this make sense? Like, how is he even in space? We never really addressed that. That's not really they never really addressed how this leprechaun could just be alive and in space, but he just appears on some random planet somehow. It's just like little things like that that make me just like chuckle, and I'm like, what is going on here? And it is very wild, very all over the place. But I think it's one of those things where, intentional or not, it's never dull for me, which I appreciate. Like I can always find something to either laugh at or point at and think is ridiculous, which I think is like, just when I rewatch these, this is kind of going to be one that I would rewatch more than others, just because it is so batshit insane, whether it's intentional or not. Whereas I think Leprechaun, whether it's unintentional or intentional, some of the humor, it still doesn't like pack the ridiculousness that this does. Like, that still feels like a movie. This does not feel like a movie, but I think for that reason I enjoy it. I mean, we haven't talked about the moment yet, but I mean, always wear a prophylactic after bursting out of a man's penis.
God.
I mean, that is just like, and it doesn't make any sense either. It's just like, literally they're like making out, right? And then all of a sudden he's just like, he starts to feel something, looks down, and then Warwick Davis just starts violently, emerging from Kowalski's penis. Like, it's one of those things where I'm just like, it's like that felt like straight out of Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Like that felt like one of those
I'd
moments
give you
where
that.
yeah, but even though it doesn't have that thematic heft to it like Nightmare on Elm Street 2 does, which we've all talked about on the show and we all love, but like, it's one of those things where I'm just like, how do you watch this and not at least like find enjoyment from like shit like that? And I guess maybe some prudes out there might be like, ew, like he's bursting out of his but like, that for me is like quintessential so bad it's good cinema. Like, that moment in itself like was probably enough for me to be like, all right, I want to move it on to the bracket, just because I just every franchise could only dream of having a moment like that. Like, that moment for me just sold it as like, okay, I know what I'm in for here, whether intentional or not. Like, there is a tone that is going on that is consistent, which I don't know if can be said about the original Leprechaun, but like, the original Leprechaun's a better movie, but like, I don't know. I find so much fun in this one. I don't know.
And with the original, there's also those moments of the intent. The one that comes to my mind is when he's on the roller skates and like he's skating towards like, I think, a barn door or something, and crashes through it, and it's a perfect outline of him. Yeah, like, that's just comedy gold. That's perfect.
Hey, you.
There's two other there's two other big moments in this movie. Well, there's three. Okay, so the way that they shoehorn in her bare breasts, and don't even attempt to hide it. Like, they're like, no, this is her power. You get to look at her breasts right now. Is insane. Like, it's weird. Not weird for when it came out, and really not weird for today. It's just, it's so blatant that it is funny. And that is also a thing. But there's two parts. You talk about him coming out of the penis. That's a big one. There's also the lightsaber. And this is kind of the big climax, but they blow him up so he can go out the airlock, which the science of that is whatever, but also like, I don't know. But the fact they had to blow him up or like make him big and then suck him out the airlock, and then his giant finger comes by, floating by. That's those parts are very funny. And again, I realize that they're probably intentional in that they know that it's ridiculous, but the ridiculousness, I don't know, it's hard because the ridiculous nature of the lightsaber, everybody knows that that's silly, that they're doing that, and I'm sure they know that it's silly, but it does put it over the top in a way that I appreciate, even though I don't love this. Like, I don't love this movie. I feel more kind of like Chris. Like, it doesn't entertain me the way Leprechaun entertains me. And a lot of it falls flat for me. I'm still very, very torn on this. But it sounds like we have two separate.
I'm voting for Leprechaun 4. I just find it more fun in its badness.
Okay, Leprechaun in Space Goes to Dill.
Chris, for Framewreck standards, I would say I'm with you, Matt. I am more entertained by by Leprechaun. It's a movie that I could put on pretty much any time and watch and just have a good time with it. Mm-hmm. I can't quite say that about Leprechaun 4. Okay. But going by the Framewreck standards, it feels like it is better in those regards.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't
even if a lot of it is intent, I don't know. There's just something about it where
I definitely agree. I'm glad I don't have to be a tiebreaker. I thought I might have to be a tiebreaker because it seemed like it was going a certain way. But I don't have to be a tiebreaker, which makes me happy because I'm still kind of torn on this because I agree. Like, it does feel more Framewreck, this Leprechaun 4. And I don't know how to gauge the intention of it because it does all feel intentional, but the intention also puts it to an over a top level. It's very weird, but now I don't have to worry about that, at least until the next round.
Even like the boobs stuff, like who's to say that they're not just like some weird pervy guys who thought like, oh, audiences want to see that and we're totally off base too. Like that stuff feels like it could have been unintentional. Like their intents were different almost. Like they
I think their intent was to show boobs because they were pervy. I think that's absolutely their intention.
Right.
The fact that they didn't hide it, like usually in a movie, like it's like, I don't know. It almost feels like they hide that the intention is to show boob by making it a big sex scene or by setting it in a strip club or whatever. They don't want to
draw attention to the perviness. Yeah.
Right. They want to like kind of hide it, make it seem artful, artsy.
Here it doesn't.
Here they had no intention of making it seem artsy. They wrote into the script a reason for her to have her boobs out. Mm-hmm. And they did it. Like that was, they were like, we're just doing this. And
but I don't
on one level, I
appreciate
that. And that's part of what makes it, I think that they probably, there's an exploitation portion of this that we can talk about, or we don't have to talk about, but that is probably there. But I appreciate their straightforwardness. And that's part of what would make me want to advance this is just how ridiculous the people who made this probably were. So I think we made the right choice.
Cool. All right, let's move on to this 3-6 matchup here. Leprechaun in the Hood and Leprechaun 2. So Leprechaun 2, the last theatrically released Leprechaun film. Leprechaun in the Hood, kind of that rejuvenation of the franchise into a very different direction than what it had been at, which is the 5th Leprechaun movie. Matt?
I'd like to start by talking about Leprechaun 2 real quick. Mm-hmm. Okay. This is my favorite Leprechaun movie. Of all of them, this is my favorite Leprechaun movie. It feels like it balances it better than any of the other movies do. Leprechaun 1, as we mentioned before, was written as a horror movie and added the comedy. Later on, they go a little bit cheesy and schlocky. They go a little bit cheesy and schlocky on purpose. And takes that over the top in this way. This one feels like a perfect balance to me because while it's not, I'm not going to say that it's just a great movie across the board. It does feel like it balances the horror and comedy really well. Plus, it has some really good characters in it, and so this movie is legitimately my favorite. And so I'm sorry that's probably going to tell you where my vote's going to go is not to this one because I think that it's legitimately good. But it does have a place here, and so I'm glad we're gonna talk about it here. One thing I really love about this movie is that originally the girl was supposed to be Jennifer Aniston. Originally it was going to be Jennifer Aniston, and they had written it that way, but then she got famous with Friends, and so they didn't have her, so they picked this other girl whose name I know and will tell you in just a moment. The actress is Siobhan Durkin, who is beautiful. Also very bad at acting. That is the downside of this movie for me is that she's just so not good. But she does provide the role of this beautiful woman who Lep can't help but go after. Like she does provide that role really well. And there's also a scene in here with boobs that they give that they hide and they give a good intention, and those were not hers; those are someone else's. So there's that. But I really like this movie. Okay, so also what's his name? The guy who plays Morty, Sandy Barron. Is so funny in this movie. He's one of the highlights for me. He's the old guy. He's so funny. He's very, very good. I really enjoy this movie a lot on a legitimate level. I would like to hear how you guys feel about Leprechaun 2.
I also thoroughly enjoyed Leprechaun 2. The lead actress, you are very correct. She is not great at acting. It's a lot of face acting. I felt like, I don't know, it's very weird. But also we get more lore about the Leprechaun. Apparently every 1,000 years he gets to pick a bride through this sneezing mechanic that he does.
Right.
It just sounded like I just said a bunch of crazy words like with that sentence. But
you did.
Right. But I love that. Also never comes up again in the future of the franchise. Just not at all.
No.
And also the fact that if you have a piece of the Leprechaun's gold, you are protected from like him killing you somehow.
Which seems to go against
it completely
the concept.
Contradicts.
Yeah. Well, and also like we talked about the continuity of this and how each movie there's like a different motivation, sort of. Although it's all kind of gold, like there's different motivation. There's the origin story kind of changes a little bit, and also the way to kill him changes in basically every movie. In this one, it's wrought iron, right? Your cast iron. Mm-hmm. That's the wrought iron. That's the thing in this one.
Which, I mean, yeah, I get it. That's fair. I kind of wish they had kept the 4-leaf clover thing, which, that's just fun. But even so, this movie, crazy fun ride. I will say they still kept with the theme of being, comical. Even with like their kills, like you mentioned the scene with her breast, but like it's somehow I guess just a face thresher. I don't know what I guess it was a lawnmower.
It was like a lawn, the lawn thing, yeah.
And he somehow thinks that after she just turned him away and goes inside, he thinks that she's at her neighbor's garage, suddenly like getting undressed. And just, it's crazy scene, but it works for me because it's very funny.
Yeah. I like Leprechaun 2 more than Leprechaun, I think, because it does go in that more sillier direction. The only thing is, like, it still does hold back, I think, because it is theatrical, and I think they really didn't want to make it too inaccessible to people who, like, genuinely did like the first Leprechaun and wanted a more, like, serious horror film, and I think that's where I'm still at odds with it, where I'm like, I wish it was just that a little bit much more sillier, because I still think they're holding back a little bit in terms of making it a full-on, like, crazy riot, but again, that's just because I did watch all these in very close succession to where, like, I'm now just so accustomed to the craziness to where I feel like if you had asked me right after watching Leprechaun 2 what I thought of it, I would have been like, yeah, it was great, it was silly, it was crazy. But now, like, I think having watched a few more, I'm like, I just personally like it when it goes a little bit bigger and bolder and crazier and wilder. But it is definitely closer there than the first one is. Like, it's inching toward what it would be. So I definitely see why it is your favorite, Matt. Genuinely your favorite. Even though, I tend to find more entertainment value just in when it gets badder, worse, I guess, not badder, worse, despite, intentionality or not. But definitely is wilder than the first. So I appreciate it for that reason. But yeah, the acting's not great. But that also does add to the badness and the humor,
I will say to comment on that you find other ones more entertaining. I also there's another one that I find more entertaining than this.
Gotcha.
I just think it's a worse movie, and so like that's what keeps it from being my favorite. So we'll get there. But yeah, so I agree with that. Let's talk about Leprechaun in the Hood. So I would like to give the floor to Chris to tell me about his experience with Leprechaun in the Hood.
Okay, my experience when I watched it as a kid, I loved it. I thought it was so funny. I thought it was like the best thing ever. And then I didn't really. It never became like a rewatch that I would do like as much as the other movies in the franchise. Mm-hmm. But watching it for this, there were so many things where I was just kind of like, oh, this was written by white people who somehow that's what they think Black people are like. And also having the Leprechaun to be this fish out of water type situation. It's not that he doesn't understand human behavior. He specifically, it's like Black people are a different breed of people to him. To him, the Leprechaun. Like, he doesn't, like, navigating through that environment for him is like being an alien. Like, super foreign to him. And that's weird.
Just to comment on that real quick, and I'll let you go on. But I found, and it was a weird thing, and it definitely is a problem. I found Lep to be the normal character in this movie. Like,
yes.
And that's a problem that they felt, that they, even to me, they felt alien. Is a problem that he felt like the cipher for this movie is a problem.
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, he is the fish out of water, but like he's in this world that's so like these Black people are so alien and foreign, and they just what? And there's just so many other things that I just want to talk about with this movie. What else? Just also the fact that I felt like every Black character in this movie, it was just so clownishly like big. And that it just seemed so weird that you don't really see that as much. I mean, the closest I guess might be the Leprechaun 3 in Vegas, where everyone kind of is kind of a weird big kind of character almost. Right. But with this, very strange. And also, oh God, right on the tip of my tongue, I had this point that I wanted to make. The fact that Ice-T is also here, which is very funny to me, is wild that they got him. And his intro scene, when he's fighting the Leprechaun, he pulls weapons out of his afro because that's a thing.
Here's the thing. Like, that might be funny. That whole thing might be funny if it were written with care.
Yes.
By a Black person who was writing this as a self-parody or a parody of their own culture.
Kind of like a Scary Movie sense.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The blackening. It's that kind of a thing where like having a Black person comment on these things makes it much funnier than a white person commenting on these things and not doing it with care.
Right.
And that's how that felt.
The white person's commentary is literally just Black people have weird hair sometimes. I wonder if they put stuff in it. Or like, I don't know. It's very strange.
Right, but that scene, him pulling something out of his afro,
it could be funny
in the blackening, might be really funny.
Right, it's a funny gag. It could be so funny. It just felt like it was very, very weird.
Yeah,
and then also the plot of this rap group rapping about positivity,
which is the whitest fucking thing.
So white.
It's like the people who give the excuse that I don't listen to rap music because of all the violence or because I don't, because of the gangster stuff. Like, I used to be one of those people who was like, I don't listen to rap because the gang stuff, I don't identify with it. You got, if you're not into gangster music, that's fine. But there are other kinds of rap.
There are other types of rap, like
that might appeal to you, and that's what I found. So the fact that they're like, no, we're doing positive raps. Everything is positive, and the positive raps are shitty. They're bad. It's bad raps, but again, probably written by a white person.
1,000%.
Yeah. The positive raps are so bad too.
Well, and also one thing that I would take away from both of the Leprechaun in the Hood movies, the Leprechaun in the Hood and Leprechaun Back to the Hood, they are also horror comedies, but there's that added element of them being stoner comedies. I would consider them to be stoner comedies. So perfect that we're talking about it today. Just that element, I enjoy that it is a stoner comedy, but the fact that it still doesn't take care with the black characters, like it treats the joke is always kind of on them and not even on the leprechaun himself. Like you said, Matt, like he's treated kind of like the straight man almost in this world of like all these crazy characters.
That's why it's so funny when he gets high. Like he's the straight man. Like
it's
really funny. Like some of the best parts of the movie is when he gets high, but like again, because he's the normal character in this movie. Like, yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah, I couldn't wait to talk about this movie.
My white brother. Tell me how you feel about Leprechaun in the Hood.
Well, it's like the best way I could describe it is it's like if someone handed their 6-year-old, a key and said, go drive my car down the highway. And it's like one of those things where you're like, this is not okay. The fact that this child is driving this car down the highway, but like if it's on the news, I'm going to watch and I'm going to tell all my friends, I'm going to say, what the hell is going on? And I'm probably going to not turn it off because it's like one of those disasters that you feel wrong for watching because you're like, it's so misguided and almost inappropriate, but also you need to see what happens because it's one of those anomalies. That's the best way I could describe it. And I hope if any kid does man a car, they end up safe at the end of it and nothing bad happens. But it's one of those things where it's like, he should not be making this movie. It's very misguided, but it's like one of those things you can't look away from because of how different it is. And I think that's also a thing is like, it does feel like such a 180 pivot from the rest of the franchise that it feels fresh. And when you're watching these all in succession to be like, this is something you would have never expected this franchise to do. So like, I kind of appreciate it for that, where I'm like, it's putting it in a new location. Like we're literally seeing him hit a bong and rap. Like what is going on? But it's also like, I would have never, ever thought to take this franchise in this direction. I just wish there was someone else to guide it into that direction where it's like, I love where it's going, just not how it's going there, you know?
Well, there's when you say like you hearing him rap and stuff, like there is having this based on a rapper or a rap group with the Leprechaun makes sense because he speaks in rhyme.
Yeah, he speaks in rhyme, which is a genius choice. Yeah.
So marrying these makes complete sense if someone who could handle it with care was taking care of it. Like that's the big thing. Like the idea is not bad. It's the execution. And
it's like one of those things where I did pull so many quotes that I was just like, not even that I was like, this is a great quote or this is funny, but more so like, I can't believe Warwick Davis said this on screen. And I wrote down a few of them. A friend with weed is a friend indeed, but a friend with gold is the best I'm told. That's like a classic, like, you know, like his speaking in rhyme. That one works. That one's funny, but then it gets even worse. Come closer, my fresh young lass. Let me take a look at you before I tap yo ass. Which is just not good. Then it gets even wilder.
Lep has sex in this one, right?
He does. He has a lot of sex in this one. Look at all these glittering goods. I've got more loot than Tiger Woods.
So topical.
And then flee while you can. The future's not good, for no one is safe from a lep in the hood. Like it's just like all these wild things you would never ever think like Warwick Davis would ever say on screen. And I can't believe he actually said, okay, I'll say that. Like, but it honestly, it's one of those things you can't look away from though. It makes it entertaining because of that. It's one of those things where I didn't even know it wasn't a black director when I first watched it. And I thought it was smarter than it actually was. And then I looked and I was like, oh, that makes sense. You know, because it's like a jarring realization. Yeah.
Upon this rewatch, as I was watching it, I was just like, oh, no one black touched this movie.
Yeah, I mean, this is the director may as well just be an old Chris Moltisanti from The Sopranos. I mean, he is as white as it can be. So it's just one of those things where I was taken aback when I learned that, but also like of these 8 movies, what's the one that's probably the most memorable? It's either this or another one we'll talk about later, but it's this is one of the more memorable ones, you know.
Yeah, it is memorable in its failure for sure. I will say that this is the only movie in the franchise where Lep lives or stays intact, because in one of them,
he gets what he wants by the end of it.
Yeah, he gets what he wants. Postmaster P becomes his emissary or whatever. and is never seen again in the franchise.
He has the magical
wouldn't that
power
have
of the
been cool
flute.
which again is a new thing that new
Again,
origin thing that we
new
didn't
lore,
have
new
before,
thing. Which again, he's the Postmaster P. He's signed to a label, right? Like to the power of the flute. But isn't it established that the flute can only affect people like if they actually hear it? Like, how are you going to put that on like a track or like an album?
I think the idea is that you can record it. I guess I don't know.
See, I don't know. I guess I assumed it couldn't be recorded, but I'm thinking too deep into for Leprechaun.
Yeah, you're being a little bit too logical. Ice-T's name is Mac Daddy Onassis, which is just good. It's one of my favorite things. Mac Daddy Onassis, because it marries the two ideas of the Irish leprechaun and the people from Compton idea, Mac Daddy Onassis. It's amazing. So for me, Leprechaun in the Hood does advance because, like I said, I think Leprechaun 2 is a better overall film, and Leprechaun 2 just whiffs a lot of things. I can tell you that because I knew it was a white writer and white director of this movie, the number of N-words that a white person wrote into the script is insane.
It makes Tarantino feel like a children's novel.
I know, right?
You know,
for me, In the Hood advances. That's where I would go.
I would also agree, just to say that, because while it has its problems, it is a Framewreck standard like quality movie. I would say that mostly to say that the fact that it was straight to VHS, you could see this movie standing out like in the stacks of other movies like Leprechaun in the Hood. What's that? And like it's just so crazy. So
just the concept alone. I agree. I think it's a clean sweep here. We've all been in agreement for all three of these, so that's exciting. But now we move on to the last matchup, which is Leprechaun Back to the Hood and then Leprechaun 3. And if you don't mind, Matt, I would like to start this one.
Yeah, do it.
Because in the way that your favorite is Leprechaun 2, I think my favorite might be Leprechaun 3. And I know a lot of people, that's not necessarily the popular opinion. A few lists online agreed with me, but I think this is kind of how we were talking about Leprechaun 2 maybe being like the best marriage. I think Leprechaun 3 is a slightly even better marriage, and no pun intended because they're in Reno or whatever, but like it is, I think, the best marriage of comedy and insanity and the horror, because I think the thing with Leprechaun 3 is it is so crazy, but also has some really great kills in it, because I think the atmosphere really lends to it well. And I think it's that whole straight to video thing where I said like Leprechaun 2 were in theaters, and now Leprechaun 3, it's not in theaters. So I feel like the pressure was off and they could go bigger and they could go grander and they could, set it in a Vegas casino, which would not be something they would like greenlit for a theater, but it didn't matter because it was going straight to VHS or DVD or whatever. I love the bigness of it. I love the setting of Vegas. I think the characters are just more memorable because they are just super weird. They're all weirdos, which I think makes them more memorable. And I just think just all the different, the idea of Leprechaun in Vegas shouldn't make sense, but it does because he's after the gold and it's like the chips and poker. Like it for some reason fits. It fits and it makes sense, but it's also just super schlocky, super over the top, super gory, and just silly and ridiculous, which is what I love in Leprechaun movies. And I feel like this is the best balance, where I think there's still some semblance of thought given into the story while also not taking itself way too seriously, but also still embracing the bigger and larger than life moments because they don't have those restrictions of a theatrical release. So this is kind of where I was finally like, oh, I get it. This is what the charm is. I get it. The lucky charm, if you will. So I really love Leprechaun 3. I just wanted to say that off the bat because this is my favorite. Yeah. So I was gonna be like, I want to champion Leprechaun 3.
That's how I felt about Leprechaun 2. Yeah. Remember earlier when I said Leprechaun 2 is my favorite, but there's another one I find more entertaining? It's Leprechaun 3. I do think that Leprechaun 3 is a more entertaining film. I love this movie. The thing that sets it apart for me is that I think there was an intention to make it funny. I also think it goes a little over the top from what they intended, maybe. And it does lean into more of the cheese and schlock section than the other one, which is what, for me, makes it more entertaining. And so while 2 is my legitimate favorite, this is probably my favorite in terms of the frame wreck of it all, like the schlock and the fun and the comedy and all that. I really love it. So I agree. Everything you said about it is so good that it's the most creative of them, because he uses a lot of he uses like in the hotel room, like the kind of the mental stuff that he does with them, and it's just there's so much in this movie that I really, really love. And so I agree. It's like, very, very good.
It's kind of like what you said, where it's like it's intentional, but the intention even like exceeds. It exceeds the intention. Where it's like, yeah, you've been making these cakes in the easy bake oven, and now you finally graduate to the big oven, where it's like, okay, the pressure's off because it's a real oven. It'll cook it even better than this easy bake oven will, and then you end up making a souffle or something. Like, it's like, you meant to make a cake in a big oven, but it still ended up turning into souffle. I don't know. My metaphors are terrible, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the intention was there, but then for somehow it still derails, which I love, which is great. Chris, what are your thoughts on Leprechaun 3?
Oh, I absolutely love Leprechaun 3, actually. I like the Vegas setting. I also have another question about the Leprechaun, just his lore. He knows who Elvis is, apparently, because he does like an Elvis impersonation. That just really seems weird to me. And just, I will say,
I feel like it just. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, what are you gonna say?
I feel like Lep is like the genie in that he doesn't have to experience the thing to understand the reference.
Fair enough.
Okay. That's a good observation.
I will say the plot of the guy like turning into a leprechaun, or being like infected with like this leprechaun gene, that falls a little flat for me. It's like that, really? But I will say that actor is doing a lot. Like
he's so good.
He's doing voice work. He's doing like just weird faces. Like
it's so funny, and that's part of what puts it a little bit over the top for me in the that it's entertaining and in the Framewreck way, is that it does fall a little flat in that it's not the best story beat, but he's so good and so over the top that it's so funny. Like the failure of that storyline is so funny that it feels fine. Like that's what it is for me. Like that's why this movie is so entertaining. Is part of why this movie is so entertaining is that storyline. He's so funny and he's so good, and it kind of like it almost feels like they get to a point where they've written this story for him, and it's like, oh well, this isn't working with the rest of our story quite as well. That sucks that now this character can't really do some of the stuff he could before, and that makes it fun for me as well. Is that he kind of isn't the hero character anymore for a little bit.
Well, I love that we. Sorry, I cut you.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, good. I love that we also have like the storyline of him being infected by the leprechaun, but then also there's a monkey's paw element of the various characters getting wishes, but obviously they go bad. Like, why those two things together? Like, we could have just had one, but I don't know.
Oh, okay, Chris. For somebody who was around in 1995, like I was here, was the interactive computer story not the most 1995 thing you've ever seen in your life?
Okay, why does he have like just a CD like ROM drive of like leprechaun lore
and an accurate representation of leprechaun lore? It's like it's true to Lep himself. Like it's
whoever put this together, they were like, okay, now we all know that leprechauns actually do exist, right? So we need to inform the people how to deal with them, how to defeat them, what they want, what they do. And it's just like, also the fact that they love potatoes. I don't know why we needed that information.
See, back on Windows 95, you could you could get this software that's like, my grandma had one that was like Magna Carta. She was the first one of us to have a computer. So she had Magna Carta, which was like which was not online. It was like a encyclopedia in your computer. So you're like, okay, well, I want to learn about giraffes. You click on giraffes, and there was like this interactive thing similar to that.
I remember that.
It's so that whole thing brought so many memories back to me of just clicking around on her computer, like learning about things.
It legitimately reminded me of computer lab in elementary school.
Oh yeah, there you go.
It just, because that would be my frame of reference for that, but like,
yeah,
it just brought that back. I was like, I love that they just put this in here because it was just at the time.
I also want to note just a little bit of history. Leprechaun 3 recorded or filmed in 14 days. 2 weeks to put this up.
Whoa,
and it became the highest selling direct-to-video film at the time in 1995. So there's something to be said about that. I think just the idea of like, we have 14 days to throw something together, and it does feel thrown together, but it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I think it's because of the time restraint, it ends up being crazier and wilder than if they had been given the full production budget. Like if they were making this into a feature, I think it would have been a lot worse than it is.
Right. Yeah. Now, as far as Leprechaun Back to the Hood,
yeah,
I will say not as entertaining as Leprechaun in the Hood. It just seemed like it was trying to rehash what had already been done, and it still carried over kind of the same problems, but with no charm, I guess, of Leprechaun in the Hood.
Well, and they didn't. They had a dangling story thread that they didn't revisit. Like, you left Lep alive in the last movie. Postmaster P was doing whatever. You didn't even mention Postmaster P.
Right.
Oh, it has nothing to do with the last movie at all, despite the title. Yeah.
But no other characters are just like, hey, that thing that happened. I would assume this is like the same neighborhood. I assumed.
Yeah, I get. Yeah.
But you would think people would talk about, oh, there's a leprechaun in this neighborhood, like a year ago, 2 years ago. It, like, I don't know, just it never comes back up. But
yeah.
I was trying to look. I couldn't tell if the director certainly wasn't black, but I was trying to see if it was like a person of color or if it was again another white guy. He looks like I don't want to make judgments, but he looks whiter. But I think he might be like. I don't know what his ethnicity is, and I don't want to assume, but I'd like to believe maybe they wanted to get course correct a little bit and make it less offensive, but in doing so, they kind of stripped it completely of its humor and its, its setting almost. It's almost like they wanted to kind of make up for the mistakes of the last one, even though the last one, they should have just had someone build on those themes just with a more authentic voice rather than kind of completely retconning and 180ing it. And also another thing I realized is Warwick Davis is barely in it for a franchise that's a Leprechaun franchise, and this is his last movie as the Lep. Yeah, he's really not in it a lot, and when he is in it, it's not as memorable as his appearances in literally the 5 other films he's in. And it's just one of those things where it's like, I really like Freddy's Dead, but a lot of people hate Freddy's Dead because they're like, for his last film, what a disservice, even though he does come back for New Nightmare as a different iteration. But it's one of those things where I feel like that's how I feel about this one. I'm like, this is the last time you have Warwick Davis as the Lep, and I just feel like they fumbled the ball with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one's pretty boring to me. I feel like it has a lot of the same problems, but it doesn't, like,
there's no payoff.
Yeah, like it just doesn't. This one doesn't work on many levels for me. It's probably like, let me look at my ranking. Oh, actually, I ranked it high on the Framewreck scale. Apparently, when I made this list, but thinking back to it, I do not feel that way anymore. So, past Matt apparently liked it a lot more than Matt remembers him liking it. I still think that I would definitely put Leprechaun 3 over Back to the Hood, regardless.
I would agree. I would 1,000% agree. Also, like, the effects in Leprechaun 3 are great. Like, the deaths are all great, interesting. So yeah. So Dill. I mean, we have a consensus.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to find information on the director. There's not a lot, but it looks like he is another white guy. So yeah, there's not any improvement here, and I agree. I think Leprechaun 3 is advancing here. Cool. Let me find it real quick. All right, we got our final 4 now. There we are.
Okay, and it should go a little faster from here because we talked about the movies.
Yeah.
But
we can start here at the top, and this is interesting because the first one kind of went by through default because the other one's just so bad. But I think Leprechaun Returns isn't wild or crazy or silly enough to advance here, but that's just my opinion.
I agree. I think Leprechaun 3 blows Returns out of the water. I think Returns is actually it's a more solid and measured movie than Leprechaun 3, and I think
definitely
that's
a better
to its
movie.
detriment. Yeah, like that's to its detriment. I think, again, like you said before, with the horror stuff, like it has some good kills in it. It has some good comedy. Comedy's not as good as Leprechaun 3, but it at least is it. But it also doesn't go over the top with it, so it does feel like a all around technically better movie. But Leprechaun 3 is just so entertaining, and for all the reasons we just mentioned a few minutes ago, for me, Leprechaun 3 definitely advances.
Cool.
Yeah,
Chris, do you
agree?
Cool.
I agree.
Yeah. Sweeping right on over there. All right, so Leprechaun 3's made the finals. This one's maybe, I don't know if it's as hard or harder, probably harder than that matchup, but Leprechaun in the Hood, the 3 seed, going up against Leprechaun 4 in Space, the 7 seed. Both movies, we agree, have a lot of issues, but it's which one is the more frame-wrecky film. I think Leprechaun 4 has the bigger, like, horror moments that are more memorable of like what the hell is going on, but I think Leprechaun in the Hood, just in its construction and its writing, is also very like what the fuck is going on. But it's hard because I don't even know what the better movie is. I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
I'm not sure on this either. So I had told them this before, but and I've mentioned it a couple times. I have my Letterboxd. I ranked them on Letterboxd according to the Framewreck scale, which I may have already mentioned. And so like I was like, I'm just going to use this as my so I don't have to rank them now, or like during the thing, I will know which one I had put above it before. And the weird thing is that Matt now, just a second ago with Back to the Hood, Matt now does not agree with Matt who had just watched the movies, because I have 4. So it goes 4, Back to the Hood, and then In the Hood. And I'm like, I would swap that around almost. Well, I'd put Back to the Hood lower, at the lowest. But part of me thinks I would put In the Hood above Leprechaun 4. But there's also just a thing about Leprechaun 4 that feels so, I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Here's the thing. I'm not a huge fan of Leprechaun 4.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But as far as a Framewreck situation, I feel like it falls in that long line of monsters in space, like your Jason X and things like that.
Oh, Jason X, so good.
That's so good. But I think because of the setting and because it's so big, like it does things that are just like very big. It feels like that might be the one. It's just hard because I feel like both have their pros and cons of why they should advance, but
yeah. Also, just looking at Framewreck, like I feel like Leprechaun 4 in Space has the biggest train wreck moment of the bursting out of the penis, but I feel like Leprechaun in the Hood has more moments in general, like where you could be like, these wild moments that keep happening. But then again, like I think the stoner comedy of Leprechaun in the Hood is honestly successful. It's successful as a stoner comedy for the most part. It's when it starts to get into the black culture where it really fumbles the ball.
Yeah.
But that it's also intentionality, and it's like Leprechaun in the Hood, I feel like he didn't mean to go out of his way to necessarily paint a bad picture, but ends up just being so misguided direction wise to where it is unintentionally misguided. Whereas I feel like Leprechaun 4 might be a little bit more intentional in its badness, if that makes sense. Like I feel like Leprechaun in the Hood, he set out to make something at least a little different, maybe like trying to like make an homage to black culture, and then totally misguided. To where it almost feels like Leprechaun in the Hood is the more unintentionally bad one.
Okay, I can see that. And going with that metric, because I do agree, then I would say that because of that, Leprechaun in the Hood would be the advancer just based on like when we go back to like intent, like something that is unintentionally frame wreck,
Yeah.
Right. So it just matters on what we're voting for, if we're voting for intent or just general schlock and theme and premise versus also just like plain old execution. It's tough.
Okay. So here's what I've keep thinking about. And Chris actually just mentioned something that illustrates a little bit why in space, it probably was a little bit higher for me originally, and that is he mentioned Jason X, which a lot of people just call bad, and they don't see the comedy, the intentional comedy in it. And if anybody's doubting, anybody who's seen Jason X, if you doubt that, if you haven't seen Jason X and want to go watch it from this lens. If you doubt that Jason X is supposed to be a comedy, then explain to me the shot where it cuts to the scene where he's in like the room where they show him Camp Crystal Lake or whatever, like where he's like, almost like I don't remember what they call it, but it's almost like it's like
a virtual reality thing.
Yeah, it's like the danger room from X-Men. Like it's that kind of a thing but like it's physical, so he could like touch it and stuff. So he goes into that room, and then it cuts away, and people are talking about it. And it cuts back, and he's beating someone against a tree in a in a sleeping bag.
I love that.
There is no chance that the person who edited that didn't go, "This is fucking hilarious." There's no 100%. Way that happened by accident. They meant for that movie to be a comedy. That brings me to Leprechaun 4. They meant for this movie to be a comedy, but I don't feel the intention of a lot. Like, I feel the intention of the comedy. I don't feel like anybody was like that moment with Jason X. That was an intentional, well-crafted moment. I don't feel well-crafted moments in this movie quite the way that I feel in like Jason X. However, I don't know. It's so hard. I will say that I was leaning toward In Space simply because of the over-the-top moments and how the intention, even though they meant for it to be comedy, how I did not feel the craft, like it was being crafted properly, and that lends it to be more Framewrecky. But I think I might agree with you guys in the hood section. So I think that might. You
might have sold me back on In Space.
Oh, no.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, let's like make an official vote. Chris, what are you officially voting for? Advancing.
It's not a better movie, but I will say In the Hood that I have to go with In the Hood because it goes back for me. I'm going with intent. Like,
okay,
yeah.
I am gonna go strictly because it just entertains me more in its badness. I will go In Space. So Matt, you are the tiebreaker.
Oh Jesus. Oh, okay.
Also, just because if we were all to queen sweep all of these, it wouldn't be as.
Oh yeah.
So this is kind of like a very. This is as close as they get. I think.
I think so too, and I think the next round is not going to be nearly as close, no matter which one we do, or at least in my opinion. So I'm going to advance In Space just because of the diatribe I just went on. I think that even though Chris went with In the Hood, he is responsible for me realizing that one of the bigger issues with In Space as well. So because he mentioned Jason X. So yeah, I'm going to go with that. And that brings us to Leprechaun 3 versus Leprechaun 4. To me, this is the easiest one. Or not easiest. First round was the easiest one with Returns versus Origins because it was so easy to get rid of Origins. For me, Leprechaun 3 is the most entertaining, and it's most entertaining because of its over-the-top badness. I would like to hear you guys' opinions, but I don't see an argument against Leprechaun 3 advance.
Yeah, I'm a little biased because it is, like I said, my favorite of this franchise, but it's my favorite because it is that just perfect marriage of schlock and just and it genuinely has great kills. Whereas I think like Returns has great kills, not as good of a comedy, and then like the originals. I've said all I have to say, but Leprechaun 3 I think is the best balance, and it's the first straight to video. It nails it.
I agree. Leprechaun 3 is great. I even remember the one scene where he attacks the pawn shop owner, and I think he bites him and says something like, "I love Indian food." And that's a crazy line.
Yeah, it really is.
God.
Yeah, there you go. Did you guys? We did not prepare Framewreck moments or quotes for this, which I guess you you did have a quote there. Did you have a quote for this movie that you?
I kind of just listed all the In the Hood raps as like my quotes as like the craziest things I had heard. But my Framewreck moment of this whole slate is the penis burst in Leprechaun 4. I just think it's such a classic, just great Framewreck moment that I think if we were judging moments alone, that one would carry it over. But I think Leprechaun 3 is the holy as in WH, the holy encapsulation of what this show's about. So I didn't have anything else. So I didn't pick an actress or anything like that, but
that's fine. We weren't going to do this. I just didn't know if anybody had that. My Framewreck moment is when Jason is beating that guy against the tree in Jason X. I know we didn't. That's not one of these movies.
That's a great moment.
I just love that scene so much.
Cool. Honorable mention though to the solar panel returns. That is just the coolest, gnarliest kill in this whole franchise. I think. There you go. Yeah. Any last words on these movies? Is Leprechaun 3 making it onto the mountain, Matt, or no?
Oh no, it doesn't make it onto the mountain. I don't think it's not. No. It really doesn't. It's really too good. I think it's like too legitimately good, even though it does go over the top. This was my number one on my ranking here as far as my Framewreck ranking. This is number one. This is the one that I wanted to win the whole time. So I'm glad that we all kind of had a consensus there. So
cool. Yeah. Well, there it is. That's Leprechaun. Very exciting stuff. Any last words just on the Leprechaun franchise? Any last parting thoughts?
I'm excited to, in a couple years, rewatch it again, just because I want to experience it again. I think just because I did it so fast, I'm not going to be interested in it anytime soon. But I'm excited to do it again and see kind of how I feel, especially looking back at these rankings and going, "Oh, why did I put that there?" So yeah, that'll excite me. I'd also interested in watching Leprechaun and Leprechaun Returns back to back.
I was just gonna say I want to do that. I might actually do that this weekend potentially, just to see how it feels. And also as a movie, just in general, I really enjoyed Leprechaun Returns. I thought it was so funny.
It was funny, yeah. So it's one of the better sci-fi originals. I mean, and not for the reason that sci-fi originals are usually good. So
fair enough.
But now we must part our dearly short little friend, Mr. Lep, and move on to the next month, which is obviously I've been channeling it here. I've been advertising it here on the channel. That's what I meant to say. The subathon next month, our 24-hour live stream from May 4th to May 5th. We have 2 Framewreck episodes coming at you. One that we had planned on doing in April, but then got pushed because the subathon was supposed to be in April and got pushed. So we figured we'll still do that one, but we'll also do the episode we wanted to do for the subathon. Also because we just need to fill 24 hours. So it's 2 episodes is better for that. So the first, Matt, we have a guest coming on to talk about a specific movie. Matt, do you want to tease that one?
Yes, we have Stacy. I don't believe we say her last name. We have Stacy coming on. To which you've seen on
Marvel Trivia.
Marvel Trivia. She's
our
the
previous
she's the Dark Phoenix or Feisty Phoenix, whichever way however she feels that day. And you've seen her on Draft Day. She's coming on. She wants to talk about The Raven. And here's the thing: I haven't seen The Raven. Have you seen The Raven, Dale?
Nope.
Neither of us have seen The Raven, so we don't know that we might both really love this movie legitimately. We have no idea how this is going to go. Even if it is that, I think we're gonna have a really great conversation. Stacy and I both really love Edgar Allan Poe, so that's part of it also. So we're gonna have a good time talking about that. Plus I'm a huge John Cusack fan, so it's gonna be a fun discussion, whether it's Framewrecky or not. But it's gonna be really good.
So the other episode we're doing, the Nostalgic Junction, was such a hit last time we did it, where we talked about Matt's favorite swashbuckling adventures. So we decided we'd take a page out of my childhood nostalgia and talk about 3 films from my childhood. And the theme, it's a very loose theme, but themes, they're my nostalgic favorites that Matt has only seen once, hated and needs to give a second chance to. And movies that two of these movies I haven't seen since I was a kid. One of them I watch a lot, but these three movies are movies that I grew up watching like on repeat on my TV as a kid, and that might date this this channel here when I say the three titles. But they're movies that Matt has only seen once, hated, and needs to give a second chance to. We'll come up with a shorter title for that, but that'll be live streamed on the Subathon. And those three films that we'll be talking about are the Mike Myers Cat in the Hat, DreamWorks' Shark Tale, and Adam Sandler's Click. So those are the three films that I grew up that I don't even know if I loved, but I watched a lot as a kid that Matt did not like the one time he watched it that he's going to give another shot to. And hey, I might turn 180 and hate all these movies. I know one of them I do watch a lot that I do really like, but Matt might end up liking these. Matt might end up hating these. Maybe, but it's just going to be a fun way to kind of talk about just the movies from my childhood, considering we just talked about Matt's. And if you guys like it, we'll keep making those episodes as well. So The Raven, Cat in the Hat, Shark Tale, Click. You guys have like 2 weeks to watch. So that's going to be very fun. And join us on the live stream because you can chat along with us. We're going to be live streaming those episodes, which is going to be really cool and really fun. But that's it for this episode. Thank you, as always, Chris, for being on and being a guest. It's always great to hear your insight on any horror, but any film in general. So thank you. Do you have anything to plug out there?
Nothing really to plug. But yeah, I always just love coming on. It's always great talking to you guys.
Yeah, always great to have you. Matt, anything else?
We'll have Chris again on sometimes, of course. Of course. Anytime we need his expertise, or just really if I miss my friend, you know.
Well, I'm always a text away.
I know, and we text, and it's good. But sometimes I just need you. I need to talk to you in person, or not in person, but talk to you with my mouth,
face to face.
Yes.
Yeah, there we are. Anyway. What do I have? No, you can just find me here on the Dill Pickle Movie Network, doing stuff, whatever Dylan will let me do most of the time on Framewreck here. Mm-hmm. We got some fun stuff coming up, as he mentioned. So you can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and pretty much everywhere on the internet at MattManXIII. And that's it.
Yeah, and happy 420, everyone. Hope you're all celebrating well. All right, and we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for watching.
What a story, Mark.